Welcome to the Tilted Halo. This is a new podcast, and it's for anybody who's a woman in ministry. You might be a pastor like myself, a bishop, a priest, a rabbi, music minister, elder, children's minister, whatever your title is. You're absolutely in the right place, especially if you're someone who loves your ministry and you're doing it well and you're feeling pressure to sometimes be perfect, and deep down inside, you know you're not. And how in the world to deal with that? And men, you're absolutely welcome here too, because this is about ministry and the same thing can happen to you. So you're all in the right place. Let's get started with the show. You know, the quickest way to kill ministry? Think small. Think like, we can't do that. And there are at least 3 solid reasons and ways in which small thinking kills ministry. At least 3. One is protection, fear of lack, fear of, well, somebody else, we don't want to do this. We got to protect our own little turf here because somebody else might copy it. Or we can't do that. We're too small. We don't have the funds. We can never pull that off. We could never get the people to come and be a part of that. Thinking like that means, of course, it won't work because you've already determined that it won't. And a second way that kills ministry is living in the past. Oh, don't we all do that so well? You know, we tried that once before. I remember a story about that very vividly from my first ministry, first 2 congregations, and thinking about ways to look at stewardship and ideas of some different programs. Oh, we tried one like that before. It never worked. Okay. How about let's read a book and as the church board and grow in understanding. I got a lot of hesitation on that. And even though the book I was asking them to read was written for the average person, it wasn't a book of theology. And I asked them to read the first chapter before our next board meeting. And came to the board meeting all excited. Let's get into this, because it was about stewardship as a whole concept, not just money, about the whole idea of stewardship. And the person who was the editor, and I think also owner of the little local newspaper, spoke up and said, well, we really don't want to do this because there's this, what's this word in the introduction, which I had not asked them to read. There was one word in the introduction, which I knew would be a problem, and which is precisely why I did not ask them to read that. But somebody read it and got upset because there was one word there that he or she could not understand. And got so much pushback after that, you know, we tried these kinds of things before, anything with stewardship, no, can't do that. It's never worked in the past, so we won't try anything new. And the third way that small thinking kills ministry is the thought about doing it alone. You know, I can do this myself, or our little congregation, our congregation can put on this big production and do a beautiful job with it. And we've got all the members here within our community to do that. That's not going to work either. A book that I've mentioned in a previous episode and in a previous session, because this is the beginning of session 3, by the way, so welcome back to that, that is the book Big Potential by Shawn Achor, and that's S-H-A-W-N, and his last name is A-C-H-O-R. And the book, again, is Big Potential. And he says that almost every attribute of your potential, from intelligence to creativity to leadership, to personality and engagement is interconnected with others. All of our potential, personally, and whether you're in a business or in a faith community, we're all interconnected. And anytime we try to go it alone and say, well, we don't need the other congregations, the other faith communities in our community, we don't need the bigger organization that we might be part of. We don't need them. We don't need a national organization that we might be part of. Oh, we can do our own thing. Anytime we do that, we're cutting down the potential of what's possible. And it'll have an impact on the potential of our ministry. So there are a couple of other things in doing it alone that I've found interesting from Shawn Achor's book. And one is he talks about an experiment that a man, and I want to make sure I got his, William Muir did. And the whole idea from the time of Darwin was, natural selection and understanding of biology and genetics and everything was that it was natural selection of individuals that got things done and got things improved. But Muir had the idea, no, it was about the group. It wasn't about individuals within a species or whatever. It was about the group. So he created an experiment. And he wanted to get chickens to be the greatest producers of all. And so he had a group of chickens that he raised and bred so that the ones who produced the most eggs got bred again and down to 7 generations so that they would be the greatest producers of eggs of all times. And then he had a control group of just, basic, ordinary, everyday chickens that nothing, just typical ways of being. Well, it turns out that he had to end the experiment a little bit early because his flock of superstar chickens and hyper producers, by the time he got down to about the 6th or 7th generation, all but 3 of them had been pecked to death. And the 3 that survived had all their feathers pecked off of them. They were so hyper competitive and so, so out of it that the other things had gotten inbred or whatever that they weren't the hyper producers at all. The control group, in fact, was far better. And if the idea was that I think it was like 160 here. They produced 160% more eggs than did these MVP chickens, as he called them, the ones who were the hyper producers. And he said, and this is a quote from page 46 of Big Potential, you can waste energy by maintaining a pecking order. But if animals don't care about a pecking order and they get along, that energy is transferred into production. In other words, when members of a group, be they human or chickens, focus only on competing their way to the top, they are likely to peck one another to death. When they work to lift one another up, everyone wins. End quote. And when I read that, it was like, oh my goodness, thinking about bullying is kind of a way of trying to create a pecking order, and nobody wins in that. Nobody at all wins. And yet, if we work together within a faith community and faith communities within a larger community or within a denominational structure, so much more can be accomplished than when we do things alone. And so, the next time you think about What can we do? We're too small. Yeah, individually, we are too small. And thinking small will kill ministry. But when we work together in not competing, not out of fear, not out of lack, but we get something far bigger, far greater to do that. And in fact, the word genius, I always thought it meant, an individual trait. And, but apparently, from what I'm reading in Shawn Achor's book, it's gotten distorted over the ages. And in the time of Shakespeare, you couldn't be a genius, but you could have genius. In other words, no one could own inspiration because by definition, being inspired means that you're a recipient of something. And so genius and creativity and inspiration, they're not things that we have. They're not things that we own, but it's something we tap into from a group, from a community, from a gathered group of people who are there. And so anytime we try to go it alone, as individuals, as a congregation, as a business, as a team in something, it cuts down our potential. And we will never have as much and be able to do as much. One of the things I've always remembered is from another book. It's a little book of drawings by Graham Jeffries called The Barnabas Bible. And it's copyrighted in like 1973 or something like that. And there's one drawing in there where Barnabas, this little person, is standing outside of a marquee, and it's something about offering like bread and wine and communion, come and have fellowship or whatever. And the idea was, this is never going to work. This is never going to last. And thinking about Jesus at the Last Supper and doing that once. And do this in remembrance of me. Well, that's never going to continue. And it's not going to last very long. And yet the next time you see him, he's out in some marquee and there's one person and then a group of 2 or 3 people and then a whole group of people and then a whole flood of people coming to receive this. And it's a beautiful reminder that if we try to keep everything to ourselves and try to hold on to it because we're scared that we can't do anything more with it, that we don't have the resources, that we can't do anything bigger with something, that it didn't work some way, that we tried it in the past, it's never going to get any bigger. God is a God of abundance. And when we forget that, everything's going to be small. Everything about who we are and what we do is going to stay very tiny, very closed in. It'll be a seed that never bears fruit, that never grows into a stalk of wheat or a great big oak tree. It takes all kinds of things together to nourish a seed. A seed doesn't grow on its own. It takes the soil, it takes the water and the sunshine and the nutrients and all kinds of things coming together for it to grow. And the same thing for us. We can't go it alone. And yet how many times as a faith leader do we try to be the driving force, the only force within a congregation, a faith community, or say that we've got all of the ideas? And when that happens, we shrink the possibilities. We shrink who we are, what can happen through us, what can happen within that faith community. And The title of this podcast is The Tilted Halo. Well, when those kinds of things happen, that's when our halo's kind of off kilter. We're not doing things the way God would have us do. So small thinking. Every time we think small, it's going to reduce the size of things. Yes, we can dream big. Dream big. The bigger the dream, in some ways, the better. May not always work. That's true. But there's absolutely no chance of it working if we don't even dream it to begin with. So stop thinking small. Fear, lack, out the window. Learn from the past, but don't live there. Don't let the past rule the present or the future. And don't go it alone, because there's so much potential when we join together to become part of God's faith community. So until next time, God's peace, God's grace, and God's love to each and every single one of you. You have been listening to Tilted Halo with me, Kathleen Panning. What did you think about this episode? I'd really like to hear from you. Leave me some comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode. And catch another upcoming episode for more conversation on ministry, life, mindset, and a whole lot more. Go to www.tiltedhalohelp.com, where I've got a resource guide and other resources waiting for you. And be sure to say hi to me, Kathleen Panning, on LinkedIn. See you on the next episode.